Dropsy dares to ask the question, what if Jesus Christ was an autistic clown who had the appearance of a West Virginian who dunked their head inside a tub of battery acid inside an episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force? And if that description sounds like clickbaiting at all, no, that's the text. That's the intent. While it sounds offensive or crass, ironically, Dropsy accomplishes the most shocking thing imaginable. It takes all of this and makes something beautiful out of it. Dropsy is a point-and-click adventure game from 2015 by Jay Tholen, who's gone on to make Hypnospace Outlaw and Slayer's X, both of which are games I could describe as going well beyond their concepts, with Hypnospace being a game about traversal of a 1990s-style fake internet, and Slayer's X taking a really solid build engine-style shooter that uses its fictional man-child of a creator as a hook of sorts. Before all this, though, Dropsy was a forum game on Something Awful back in 2008. Kinda similar to something like Homestuck. Oh, you bet your ass we're gonna be talking about Homestuck on this channel. Players on the forum would write out what they wanted Dropsy to do, and Jay would draw out the corresponding scene on the fly, allowing the community to basically play this game that didn't exist. And over the years, this would evolve into a retail release into something beautiful and hideous and amazing and that and great. Clowns? Dropsy is about an evil clown that burns down his circus, killing innocent people, including his own mother, and is to be distrusted. With blood on his flaps and hate in his heart, and hold on, I have just received this note. Oh, my bad. Dropsy is the story of a clown who comes from a traumatic, horrible experience where he lost his mother and is viewed by the entire town as this monstrous figure. You start off with little goals, like trying to honor your mother with a gift at her gravestone, and take care of your father when he gets sick, accompanied by your little pupper best friend, who's just a good boy, the best boy, who's a good boy, puppy, piss everywhere. But surprisingly, for a point-and-click game, there's not a whole lot of story in the A-plot in terms of actual narrative. In fact, the way it's built, unless you're using a guide, I'd say it's more accurate you stumble into the plot from the real objective of the game. Dropsy just wants a hug. He's one of the least cynical characters ever created, the definition of don't judge a book by its cover. Because Dropsy is kindness. Mechanically, Dropsy is in a world that hates him and fears him, and your goal is just to make everyone feel happy and loved. From a player perspective, you want everyone to hug you, or fist bump you if they're not comfortable. Dropsy is a game about figuring out strangers' needs and fulfilling it to make them happy. And that's the game. I'd say it's closest in replicating the feel of a Lost Love to Lick title, like Moon, or specifically Tulip. A game where your goal was to get kisses from everyone you could in a cynical world. Which is a lot like my personal goals from life. Except instead of kisses, I'd trick people into putting on a copy of Cool Dog on DVD and we just watch Cool Dog. Dropsy isn't nearly as punishing though. In fact, unless you're aiming for 100%, I describe this closer to finishing a jigsaw. Most of what you have to give can be small things, but they plant the seeds of hope. Everything you do in Dropsy, with very few exceptions, are done to make the world better, not worse, even if they don't drastically change people's lives for the most part. And that's actually kind of unique for adventure games. And I say this where Sam and Max are some of my favorite games of all time. Like, it's not a shock to say you do bad things in point-and-click adventure games. It's the nature of the genre. Dropsy stands out, though, because it's so good nature, it's actually counterculture. Everything about Dropsy isn't cool by design. It's subversion. And it couldn't be more apparent than just staring at the lovely boy himself. Clowns in general have this rap for being horror icons and making people uncomfortable. I find it ironic because clowns were a creation of entertainment. The jester wasn't a weak position, they had hidden power because through entertainment they had the voice of influence to the king. A jester gets the last laugh, and clowns seek to entertain and delight the masses. But over the years, because of their attachment to the concept of joy and overdramatics, they morphed into this public consciousness as evil. And so to divert that with Dropsy, it feels like this deliberate choice. If we remove the meme from the guy, let's look at who Dropsy really is. He's a bubbly, bouncy man who sleeps with teddy bears and hugs his fridge and random trees. He shows affection to everyone around him, but is often misunderstood for his intention. He walks with hand flaps and expresses himself in weird ways that isn't able to be connected with neurotypicals. Dropsy's autistic. It's important understanding that when I say autistic, this isn't a value judgment or internet cruelty. In fact, if anything, as a bitch on the spectrum herself, no shockers, it draws me closer to the work. Dropsy isn't the representation y'all want it, but it is probably the truest representation, at least in terms of video games. For those of you not in the know, autism spectrum disorder, ASD, is a neurological and developmental disorder that affects how people interact with others, communicate, learn, and behave. But it's also a little trickier than a simple, oh, that brain doesn't work, because autistic people are valid. Like, this isn't a case where someone needs to be fixed. In fact, it's pretty common for people who are neurodiverse to be friends with people who are also neurodiverse, finding their own community. It's a different wiring of the brain, but it literally functions differently, and it has its own strengths and weaknesses. And those weaknesses only stand out because we live in a world built for neurotypicals. But because it's a spectrum, there's no one-size-fits-all. So if you relate to any of this or you don't, there's somebody who does. It can be misunderstood, though. And because of that, there are very few places in education that I would just like to give a little hint on, especially if you don't know this shit. And for a lot of us, you may associate it with lolcow figures rather than a more human approach, which I aim to do. For example, there are people unable to make any sounds at all. This may either be a permanent thing, or if you're like me, it's selective mutism. I go mute personally whenever I get overwhelmed and burned out. And there are those that don't have control over what their voice does. So when I hear noises like this, I hear babbling. I hear stimming. I hear expressions of joy or sadness, but expressions that comes as an extension of self. Oh, stimming. Keep your brain from being under or overstimulated. You do it too, but you may not know it even if you're not autistic. Like, do you ever sigh when you're stressed out? You do that to regulate your breathing, but you're also serving neurological purposes, right? Your brain is an engine and you're letting out the exhaust to keep it functioning. Well, autistic people stim a lot more because there's far more demands from the way that our brain interacts with the world. But when I see hand flapping, I'm seeing joy, but I'm also seeing brainworms being satisfied and being satisfied in all of these movements. The way he interacts, he feels very stim-based because he exists from his feelings. And from his perspective, he's just a clown wanting to surround himself with love, and that gives him an internal warmth. The ultimate stim. Love, warmth, goodness, good vibes. And hugs can be incredible because they literally calm down the central nervous system. They have the power to reset anxiety. But I hear you in the comment section. How dare I say this ugly thing has a disorder that I may or may not relate to, and how dare I throw people under this bus? This is better representation than you may want to admit, except maybe to the moon, in terms of like the lived experience rather than a viewed experience, which are a different thing. But okay, Miss June, bunny thing, you sold me on Dropsy as autistic, at least from an emotional standpoint. I personally am going to do more research from other wonderful creators. But how dare you say, Jesus, that's disrespectful. I won't have this man be ruined by you. I would also like to come at this so you and I are on the same page. While yes, I hear you, I am a queer autistic trans furry with DID who's got weird-ass religious beliefs. But my hottest of takes is that Jesus isn't Jesus. He's a philosophy taught by this guy named Jesus. And this philosophy was to love all of God's creatures. This belief that we are all beautiful and valuable, and helping those different from us allows for a better world. And over the years, that has gotten more and more confused, mostly due to bad faith actors preaching hate and going against, well, God's original plan. We should only eat cornflakes, avoid all medication, kick out your kids that aren't traditional, and none of these things are Jesus. And while I could make that let's dunk on all religious beliefs video, it's not right, because I do believe in these values. Which is funny, because I wear this collar around my neck and have a hickey on my shoulder. And my grandmother is looking down from heaven and going, where did we go wrong? And I'll tell you, it was when you told me I could be literally anything because I took that seriously. I guess my point is, as I get older, I find cynical attitudes really boring. And I think an ideology that leads to love is a better worldview that allows people kindness. And spoilers for this clown game that I've talked very little of the runtime in a video about the clown game. I'm a good YouTuber. Dropsy ends up working for a CEO with the intention of recreating the worst night of Dropsy's life. It turns out, spoilers, he was the clown's long-lost hateful brother. Also, they're like aliens that landed on the planet Earth, Superman style. And he wants Dropsy to suffer. But of course, it backfires. Dropsy is surrounded by love. People who know he wouldn't hurt a soul, and each and every character stands up to the police to give you a chance to set things right. So what does Dropsy do? He goes in for the hug, of course. He goes in to forgive this man, and he is shot, cold, dead. He ain't gonna be in Rush Hour 3. But he is brought back to heaven, the spaceship, and reclaims his role as king. It's literally the story of Jesus told metaphorically, and the signs were all over the game. Religion is one of the biggest themes, even if it's not all Christianity, but individual beliefs. Dropsy isn't about changing people. He's about loving people for who they are. He's about community and kindness, and against discrimination. And to me, the value of Dropsy isn't based off a single ideology, but rather that of the misunderstood outsider who, through his love and kindness, is able to break through the barriers of oppression and find themselves at the heart of the community. And I don't think you need to be religious or autistic to find meaning in that. In the real world, unfortunately, not all communities can be as accepting, no matter how much of yourself you give. There needs to be levels of protection. There needs to be resilience. And when I strip away all the layers from this story, it is technically about a man getting shot for loving someone who could never accept him. But Dropsy isn't a character that bends to the will of what's acceptable. He's someone that is already perfect. And it's his bumbling, weird-ass self that, over time, brings people closer to him, to appreciate the version of himself unmasked. I guess what I'm saying, stay weird. Thrive in the weird-ass version of yourself and find the people who appreciate you for who you are. Because if we had more people like Dropsy in the communities that could really use it, we'd have a better world.